Welcome to the Project Core Professional Development modules. This module, incorporating the Universal Core vocabulary into instructional routines, will provide an overview of principles for incorporating the Universal Core vocabulary across instructional routines and offer specific examples of ways to teach and use the Universal Core vocabulary during academic instruction. Project Core is being conducted by the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies, a unit in the Department of Allied Health Sciences at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. As you know, the Universal Core vocabulary is a set of 36 words that are used frequently across communication purposes and contexts. The Universal Core includes a variety of word types that can be used to talk about different topics, ask and answer questions, engage in social exchanges, make requests, refuse things, and seek and maintain social interaction. While the Universal Core only includes 36 words, they are powerful words that are an integral part of Tier 1 of the Multi-Tiered System for Augmenting Language, MSAL. In Project Core, we're using the Universal Core to help students with significant cognitive disabilities develop symbolic communication skills. A key to the approach is the dramatic increase in the opportunity to teach and learn that comes with using the same set of words across purposes and contexts. As a part of the universal supports being built for Tier 1 of MSAL, we are identifying common instructional routines that can be used to promote communication and academic success using the Universal Core. Instead of focusing on a specific curriculum or program, we are identifying instructional routines that could be applied across a variety of curricula or instructional programs. We are also working to identify routines that could be used to support symbolic communication development across educational placements, including classrooms where all of the students are learning to communicate symbolically, classrooms where only a few students are still developing symbolic communication, and general education classrooms, where individual students with significant cognitive disabilities are sometimes placed. Whether educators use the instructional routines we include in MSAL or integrate Universal Core in other ways, there are a number of principles to keep in mind. First and foremost, integrating the Universal Core requires adults to attribute meaning to students' behaviors whenever possible. This means adults must watch and listen in order to identify times when students move or vocalize in a way that could be interpreted as an effort to communicate. Integrating the core also requires modeling. Adults must regularly point to and say core words during their interactions with students. They should also repeat and expand upon student efforts to communicate. When students communicate using non-symbolic means, such as facial expressions, gestures, or vocalizations, adults can attribute meaning and show students how they might use core to communicate the same idea using symbols. When students select or point to individual words from the Universal Core, adults can repeat the student's selection and model how to combine the symbol with an additional symbol to communicate more complete ideas. For example, when a student selects the symbol he to talk about a character in a book, the educator might point and say he and then add a little more by saying he go. While the focus of expressive communication is on the use of the 36 words in the Universal Core, there should still be a focus on building receptive vocabulary skills and teaching words and concepts that are relevant to the curriculum. However, while teaching students to understand new words and concepts, adults can model how to use the Universal Core to talk about and express understandings of the new words and concepts. For example, instead of providing students with a communication display that includes book-specific vocabulary, such as the names of characters, educators can teach students to talk about characters using Universal Core words like he or she. Across academic contexts, students can learn the meaning of many new words and develop their conceptual understandings while learning to communicate expressively using the Universal Core. Instructional routines vary across classrooms based on the age of students, the areas addressed by academic content standards, and the type of classroom. Some instructional activities happen on a daily basis, and others may occur weekly or even monthly. Some involve group discussions and interactions. Others require more individual effort. Regardless, each offers an opportunity to teach students to communicate using the universal core vocabulary. In developing the EMSAL model, we are especially interested in the ways teachers integrate the universal core during their English language arts instruction. The prominence of language, listening, and speaking in most K through 12 standards in English language arts makes this a perfect area in which to emphasize teaching and using the universal core. Because we are targeting the communication skills of students who are beginning symbolic communicators in EMSAL, we have focused supports for integrating the universal core in English language arts at the emergent literacy level. Specifically, we are building instructional routines, modules, and other supports for shared and independent reading, predictable chart writing, independent writing, alphabet knowledge, and phonological awareness. To find these supports and others that will follow in mathematics and other academic domains, visit the Project Core website at www.project-core.com. For now, let's consider science as an example of an instructional area where you could integrate instruction and use of the universal core vocabulary. In science classes or during science activities, there are many reasons to communicate. Teachers communicate to provide information, give directions, direct or redirect a student's attention, and so on. At the same time, students also communicate to share information. In addition, they communicate to interact with teachers and peers, to request help or clarification, to ask and answer questions, or obtain materials. Some of the ways that students might learn to use the universal core to share information include statements like "it go up" or "it go in" or "on." Students might also share information by saying things like "put it on" or "in." They might interact with teachers and peers by saying things like "I" or "you look," or by telling someone "you do it" or "I do it." They might use the universal core to request help or clarification by saying "help," "what," or "why." They might use core to obtain materials by saying "get it," "want it," or "want that." During a lesson about the wind in one classroom, the teacher modeled the use of core throughout the lesson. Sometimes she pointed to a poster-sized version of the universal core on the wall, and sometimes she pointed to the symbols on students' individual universal core systems. The teacher began by describing wind as moving air. Then she said, "It can go," as she pointed to "can" and "go" on the universal core board. She continued to teach students about vocabulary related to wind, such as breeze and gust. In doing so, she emphasized that these are different kinds of words as she pointed to and said, "different." Next, the students got a chance to see and feel wind when the teacher turned on a small fan that had strips of crepe paper attached to it. She told them, "I will turn it on. We can feel some wind," as she pointed to turn, on, and some. As the teacher turned on the fan, one of the boys in the class reached out toward the fan. The teacher attributed meaning to this gesture and said, "Do you want to look at it?" as she pointed to look on the student's universal core display. When the teacher turned the fan toward one student, she screeched in delight and the teacher replied, "Does that feel good?" as she pointed to good. When the student screeched again, the teacher said, "Do you want more?" as she pointed to want and more. Just as the teacher was wrapping up, she noticed one student pointing to the symbol "make" on his communication board. The teacher said "make" as she pointed to his board. Then she said, "Should we make more wind?" as she pointed to make and more. By repeating the boy's selection of make, she was recognizing his message, and by modeling the addition of the word more, she was offering a model of more conventional communication. The lesson about wind provided many opportunities to attribute meaning to the students' non-symbolic behaviors and to expand their use of symbols. It also provided the teacher with a variety of reasons to model the use of core vocabulary, while she built students' receptive understanding of new vocabulary and new concepts. Pause for Activity 1. The example from science offers a model of each of the principles we are emphasizing in building supports for Tier 1 of EMSAL. Regardless of the content area, successful implementation of the universal core during instructional routines requires adults to attribute meaning whenever possible while modeling the use of the universal core and using it to repeat and expand upon the ways students use the universal core. While there is an emphasis on the use of the universal core for expressive communication, successful integration of the core does not preclude instruction focused on words that are not among the 36 words in the universal core. In fact, successful integration of the universal core requires adults to continue building students' receptive understanding about content-specific vocabulary while showing students how to talk about the new vocabulary and concepts using the core. This applies during social studies, when students learn about history, government, geography, economics, civics, sociology, and even anthropology. As in science, social studies instruction presents a number of possible reasons to communicate. During social studies, students might communicate in order to share information, describe, compare, sequence, comment, state opinions, and ask or answer questions. Certainly, this list is not complete, but it does demonstrate that there are a number of potential reasons to communicate during social studies and during most academic instruction. To summarize, learning to use universal core vocabulary requires adults to intentionally attribute meaning to all communication efforts, whether or not they are symbolic. It also requires adults to build the use of the universal core throughout the day. At the same time, academic instruction should continue to build understanding of content-specific vocabulary and concepts, but talk or communicate about those words and concepts using the universal core vocabulary. Over time, students will learn to use the universal core to communicate for a variety of purposes across a variety of contexts. This concludes the module. Your feedback is important to us. Please take a couple of minutes to complete a brief survey about this module by going to project-core.com/PD survey. Thank you for your participation. To learn more about Project Core and to access free resources and materials, visit the website at project-core.com.